Most people do not realize that we're the only Western nation in the world that still murders their own citizens via the death penalty. But that's just the beginning. Oh me, oh my. I think in America, without sounding sanctimonious about this, with a very small amount of research, you will find it shocking what we do to our own people, our own fellow humans. Shocking. And I know a lot of countries find it shocking, but I don't know a ton of people in the US who find it shocking. So I want to tell you a little bit more about it. You might know some of this, but there's some of it you might not know. Some of this is a little bit new. Across time, 4 or more out of every 100 people put to death by the state, national, federal, state, are found innocent post-mortem. That's 4%. You might say, 4%, that's nothing. But how would you like to be that, 1 out of 4? And it happens all the time. Ask the Innocence Project. They have gotten so many people off death row who were innocent, and a very large percent compared to the population are Black, brown, and Indigenous people. It's not a coincidence. Most people know there are few systems in the US that are more racist at every level than our supposed justice system in the United States. So why am I talking about that tonight? Well, I'm going to tell you. It's because Trump's scheduled more federal executions than any other president in at least a century. Let me say that again for the people in the back. Trump has scheduled more federal executions of our fellow human beings than any other president in at least a century. And if you're pro-death penalty and you're listening, please take part in this conversation, because you will very likely learn some things that you did not know about who we kill in America. All right? What we do with solitary confinement is barbaric. And what we do to people, putting them on death row, is barbaric for years and years and years. And what we do to people in prison, the way we treat them, the environment we allow them to live in, doesn't have to be that way. It's not like that in all countries. But we accept it. Welcome to America. We accept that. The idea that most people in prison right now haven't even had a trial yet is abhorrent. You lose your job, you lose your children, you lose your spouse, you lose your self-esteem, you lose your identity. And you haven't even had a freaking trial yet. That is disgusting in a nation that boasts liberty and justice for all. The Washington Post editorial board describes this as a sickening spree of executions. To put it in perspective, only 3 people have been executed by the federal government in the past 50 years. Meanwhile, in less than 5 months, 8 people have already been put to death by Trump's justice, put that in quotes, system, with 5 more executions scheduled to happen before he leaves the office. All right. Death penalty is awfully permanent, people. 4% of the people murdered via state-sanctioned murder are found innocent. That's 4 too many. I'm vehemently opposed to death penalty on so many levels. I cannot even go there. But today I wanted to show you exactly who we kill, because I think a lot of people don't quite know exactly who we kill. We execute people who are severely mentally ill. We execute people who have really low IQs. We execute people who, the people who originally, were in the jury, took back, their vote, and take back their vote or say they lied. It doesn't matter sometimes. And sometimes I'm sure we execute people who actually did the crime. But this is not good enough for me. I don't know what your standards are, but it's not good enough standards for me. And it's incredibly racist.
United States is the only Western country that still uses the death penalty. We rank 5th in the most executions, just behind Iran, Saudi Arabia, North Korea, and China. Last month, Arkansas took capital punishment to a whole new level by attempting a controversial execution schedule that would have seen 8 inmates put to death by lethal injection over a 10-day period. Why the rush? The executions were scheduled in such rapid succession because the state's supply of controversial lethal injection drug expired at the end of April. You may wonder, why don't they just get more? Well, that's the thing, they can't. No one will sell it to them because they know it's being used for execution. I am here to tell you about a system you think you already know. It's called capital punishment. So please listen carefully because the truth is shocking. So to start out, the US states fall into 3 categories. States that don't have the death penalty at all, states that have the death penalty but they're on the books but they never carried them out, and states that pursue the death penalty and carry out the executions. These are the ones in red. Before we get back to Arkansas, let's take a look at some figures that have held true over time. Studies show that executions carried out since the early 1970s historically kill innocent people 4% of the time post-mortem. Overall, nearly 1 in 10 death row inmates ends up being exonerated eventually. To make matters worse, the death penalty is wrought with systematic racism. Black people who kill white people are sentenced to death more often than white people who kill black people. Another thing, did you know 1 out of every 10 who has been executed in the United States to date has had severe mental illness? Yes, we kill people with mental illness. I mean, that's sick. Another shocking fact is that we give the death penalty to people who've committed their crimes when they were teenagers. Did you know that since 1976, 22 teenagers were given the death penalty? Now, it's true, they weren't executed when they were teens. We waited patiently for them to come of age to do that. And finally, some states allow state-sanctioned murder of people whose IQ is as low as 70. They're developmentally disabled. They might not even have understood the crime. And there's one more thing to consider. It's the issue of botched executions. In other words, executions that have gone wrong, not because they killed the person, but 7% of all lethal executions, lethal injections, are a botched job. So what about that Arkansas story I was going to tell you about? Well, it's going to be a quick one. Over the course of the last month in Arkansas, a man suffered a botched execution by lethal injection, during which he heaved and coughed and writhed in pain for 13 minutes before succumbing to the poison. Another man with an IQ of 70 was scheduled to be executed in Arkansas, but the execution was stopped in the 11th hour. 2 men scheduled for execution, despite the fact that there was DNA evidence that could exonerate them, but was never tested before, could have been executed. A man with paranoid schizophrenia was scheduled for execution, and in the 11th hour, he got a stay. So in the 11th hour, some of these people, just hours before their execution, were granted stays, and others were not. Is this how you envisioned capital punishment in the United States of America? I didn't.